Bum 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 bum. Begun. The Epstein Wars have. Welcome back to the channel, everybody. My name is Xile. Today we are talking about the situation in the Middle East, the war with Iran, Iran, however you want to say it. I made a video, like 3 weeks ago, actually a couple days before the war started, about how this war was going to happen and how it was all going to go down. And I gotta say, I was pretty much dead on the money. I even predicted the exact date that it would start. You can go back and watch that video if you don't believe me. So I'm now 2 for 2 with predicting wars on this channel. Great. Today we're going to focus on the Iranian conflict and exactly what's happened these past 3 weeks since all-out war has broken out. So, first things first, we will go over the causes of this war, why we're doing this. Then we will talk about all of the military targets that have been hit, all the casualties that have occurred. We'll discuss the big news that actually affects everybody in the world, namely the Strait of Hormuz is officially closed for business, although there has been some developments on that front in the past couple of days. We'll talk about the impact of both oil and natural gas. We will look at some effects of this war in countries that are not the United States. Then we'll look at the effects of this war in the United States. We'll look at the looming imminent invasion of Karg Island. We'll talk about the main sort of dance or play-by-play that's happening in this war, which is the interplay between drones and ballistic missiles and interceptors. And then we will discuss the future and why I basically think that we are screwed and everybody in the United States government is a complete and total moron. Alright, first things first, we need to discuss the causes, and the number one cause of this war is Israel. I mean, it's very clear. I don't think you can even argue this point at this point. If Israel did not want this war to happen, this war would not be happening. It's as simple as that. And what's more, Marco Rubio basically admitted as much. Let's roll the clip.
The third is the assessment that was made that if we stood and waited for that attack to come first before we hit them, we would suffer much higher casualties. And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed.
So yeah, even though he later tried to walk back that statement, the damage has been done. The truth has come out. Yeah, it's pretty obvious. Israel wants to create, and not just Israel, by the way, every single rabid Christian evangelical zealot in the United States also wants this to happen. They want the creation of what's called Greater Israel because, well, Israel wants it because they just want more land, because they're, imperialist, fascist regime. But all the religious fanatics in the U.S. want it because it will fulfill the biblical prophecy that is supposed to bring about the end times and the rapture and Jesus coming back and all of that nonsense. So, as you can see on this map here, this is the territory of what quote-unquote Greater Israel is, and they've already started to, nab some of this. They've already invaded Syria, for instance, and currently they are conducting a ground invasion of Lebanon. And real quick, let's tab over to the live UA map and look at that ground invasion. So here we have the ongoing Israeli invasion of southern Lebanon. Everything you see here in red is the area that Israel has demanded all civilians evacuate from, and that accounts to roughly about 800,000 civilians. So already 800,000 civilians have been displaced. All of these individual, bomb markers represent an Israeli airstrike. And these markers like this is like an actual ground assault invasion. These areas here in blue are the territories that the Israeli army has already occupied during this invasion. As you can see, Israel is really hammering Lebanon, and they are pushing further and further north, and I sincerely doubt that they will stop at this river. They also recently blew up one of the bridges that crosses this river, one of the main arteries connecting northern and southern Lebanon. So, I'm not exactly sure how this will play out. I'm not exactly sure when they will stop, but they definitely aim to at the very least annex southern Lebanon, although they'll probably end up going for the whole thing. They're not going to stop at Lebanon. They also want Syria, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt. Now, in order to accomplish all of this, they need there to be no strong, unified country in the Middle East to oppose them. That is Israel's ultimate aim in this war. They want not just regime change, they want to turn Iran into a failed state. They want it to balkanize. They want the Azerbaijanis in the north, and the Baluchis in the southeast, and the Arabs in the southwest, and all of the various ethnic groups to essentially cause a civil war within Iran and turn it into a failed state like Libya or like Syria was up until very recently. If they can do that, there will no longer be a strong regional power in the Middle East that can oppose Israel and the United States, and thus Israel will be allowed to expand into whatever it wants. That's the theory anyway. The final point is this. I've seen a lot of talk about, Jeffrey Epstein's connection to all of this, right? So obviously Jeffrey Epstein was heavily involved with Donald Trump. He's heavily involved with Mossad. He's heavily involved with Israel. I've seen a lot of people say that basically Netanyahu was able to blackmail Trump into participating in this war because he has, videos of Trump doing unspeakable things to little girls on Jeffrey Epstein's island. I think this is probably true, but I do not think it is the main reason Trump agreed to this war. I imagine the conversation went something like this.
Look, Mr. Netanyahu, I know we had great times on Mr. Epstein's island eating babies together, but I just don't think the American people will be sold on this war.
And then Netanyahu goes, look, Trump, it'll be great. We'll do a quick in-and-out strike like Venezuela. We'll decapitate the regime. It'll be perfect. Plus, all the neocons in your administration want war. Pete Hegseth's going to be so happy. Marco Rubio's going to be so happy. And just remember, friend, if you don't want to do this with us, I got those videos. I can leak them to the New York Times. I got all these friends in media. So you better play ball. Capiche? I don't know why I said capiche. I don't know why I made him sound Italian, but you get the point. So while I think that, all the Epstein files, dirt, blackmail, whatever, definitely played a part, I don't think it's the main motivating, driving force behind this war. I think even if Netanyahu didn't have that ammunition, this war would still have happened. Another offside reason I've seen for this war is to protect the Iranian people from their own government. Now, just a couple of months ago, there were the largest protests in Iran in probably 30 or 40 years, and during that time, tens of thousands of protesters did indeed die. They were killed by their own government. When all of this went down, Trump made, as he does, a bunch of statements on Truth Social, and basically said that, if Iran killed any more protesters, they would be crossing a red line and the U.S. would intervene. And then 2 months went by and nothing happened. Fast forward to today, and of course, now something has happened. But why didn't it happen at the time the protests were going on? Well, the main reason is that we were simply not ready. We did not have the military equipment, the personnel in place to actually conduct the military strikes that would be necessary to overthrow the government in conjunction with the people. So we Bay of Pigs'd it. The support simply never arrived. Of course, now that all this is over, we can kind of use this as a post hoc justification for what we are doing in Iran. It's important to note that this is probably the weakest the Iranian regime has been in a long time. This is why this moment was picked to do these strikes. This is why this didn't happen 6 months ago or 6 months from now. This is why it happened right now, because of these protests and because of the aftermath of these protests. So, The Iranian regime appears to be weak on the outside, so it's the perfect time to move in and hopefully topple them and replace them with a more pro-Western regime. Of course, that didn't happen. Additionally, there were reports that the CIA was trying to arm the Kurdish insurgents in western Iran to overthrow the government or to fight against the IRGC, but the Kurds refused because the US and Donald Trump specifically has betrayed the Kurds like 5 or 6 times at this point, so of course they no longer trust us, and they basically told the CIA to shove it. Good on them, I wouldn't trust us either. It's also worth noting, I've mentioned this in my Venezuela video, I mentioned this in my last Iran video, but the way that you endear yourself to a population is not by bombing them. You do not blow up oil depots and cause cancerous rain to fall on 10 million people and expect them to ally themselves with you against their government. Even though the vast majority of Iranian citizens hate their government, what they hate even more is a Western-backed puppet dictatorship like what it was under the Shah, or B, the complete fracturing of the country and, you know, the Persian majority having to retreat from non-Persian dominating areas and effectively the collapse of their state. They definitely don't want that. So we're not going to see any, no matter how bad the economic conditions get, I sincerely doubt we will see any kind of popular uprising within Iran because the Iranian people understand that Israel doesn't care about them, the United States doesn't care about them, nobody cares about them. The only people that even slightly care about them are the current Iranian government. And then finally, the final reason that the American government and Israel continually try and cite is, of course, Iran's possession of various weapons, the first of which is their ballistic missile program. Now, there is virtually nothing America can do to actually eliminate their ballistic missile program. They have the missiles, they've demonstrated they have the missiles, they haven't run out of missiles, it's going to take a while for them to run out of missiles, so that basically is BS and makes no sense. And then we have the nuclear weapons, Jesus Christ. So, I don't understand how you can be like a diehard MAGA supporter and not just completely lobotomize yourself. It was a mere 8 months ago when Donald Trump struck Iran the first time and declared that their nuclear program was completely destroyed, you know, all their uranium was buried under a mile of rubble, and it would take them forever to restart. Now here we are, 8 short months later, and all of a sudden Iran is suddenly about to build a nuclear bomb again. I just don't know. I don't even know what to say. I mean, like, if you seriously believe that Iran possesses a nuclear weapon or is close to having a nuclear weapon at any point in the past 20 years, I got a bridge to sell you. Netanyahu has gone on TV and said Iran is 6 months away from building a nuke since at least 2014, and even in scattered appearances before that. It's just ridiculous. It's the boy who cried wolf. The nuclear weapons don't exist. They never existed. This should remind all of you of the whole weapons of mass destruction bit from the Iraq War under Bush. You know, they spent 2 entire years after 9/11 propagandizing, saying, you know, Saddam has chemical weapons, Saddam Iraq is a rogue state, Saddam's dangerous, etc., etc. And now they're trying to do it again. They're saying Iran has weapons of mass destruction, they're crazy, they're going to nuke the world, we got to go in there and stop them. It's the same thing. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. You know what I'm saying? So don't be gullible. Learn from our past experiences. Learn from your mistakes. Don't be a moron. Alright, so now let's look at some of the casualties, both in terms of personnel and equipment, that have occurred. A lot of these numbers are old numbers, and especially by the time this video gets out, basically every single one of these numbers is probably higher than it actually is. So first of all, there's been about 3,000 total strikes from America and about 1,000 strikes per day from Israel, although that number has dropped off a little bit. Iran has had every single one of their naval vessels destroyed, with the exception of some tiny, mine layers, but all their destroyers and frigates and submarines are at the bottom of the ocean. The supreme leader has been killed, along with dozens of other high-up officials in the Iranian government. And the Ayatollah's son has now taken over, although he was recently injured in another strike, but does not appear to be dead. About 1,500, or I should say at least 1,500 civilians in Iran have been killed, including on the first day of the war. A girls' school was struck. Awesome. Next up, we have the coalition. So we have intercepted hundreds of missiles, thousands of drones. The UAE, Oman, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Syria, Israel, Jordan, Cyprus, Turkey, and Azerbaijan were all targeted with drones or missiles. Some of the targets Iran has managed to destroy include data centers. Those are to power your large language AI models, oil storage facilities, and luxury hotels, namely in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, which is currently crashing the tourist industry in Dubai. We'll touch more on that in a second. At least 12 American aircraft have been destroyed, although I think I saw reports of a F-35 being damaged as well. And 5 of those come from, there was some sort of mid-air collision or something with a bunch of American aviation fuel tankers, okay? Israel has also suffered significant damage, probably the most significant damage out of any country other than Iran. Jerusalem, Haifa, and Tel Aviv have all been hit, and the damage is actually quite extensive. All right, now the big one. This is the one that no matter where you live in the world, this part of the war affects you, and that is the closure of the Strait of Hormuz. So first of all, about 3,000 merchant vessels are just now stranded in the Gulf. They can't exit through the Strait of Hormuz. They can't leave the Persian Gulf. And that accounts for about 10% of all the global shipping containers. So the entire shipping container capacity of the world has been reduced by 10%, which is obviously not good. Now, I see a lot of confusion about this. The Strait of Hormuz isn't like physically closed. The Iranians didn't like hoist up a giant, net and set it on fire like in that one episode of Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's more of a psychological closure, right? So the fear is that, first of all, Iran has laid mines in the strait, or they could use naval drones, or they could use regular drones to target any ship that attempts to pass through the strait. And they actually did successfully target a couple of tankers with naval drones about a week and a half ago. So it's really the fear of Iran doing something that keeps ships from passing through rather than any specific action that Iran takes. There is a financial side to this too. Even if the United States were to guarantee that there was safe passage to the Straits, and even if they sent a carrier group or something to try and make that happen, that wouldn't necessarily lower the insurance cost. And if the insurance cost for these boats, for these tankers, for these container ships to go in and out of the strait is too high, it doesn't matter what the United States does. It will simply be financially unviable for any company to make that risk. Okay? So it really doesn't matter what the U.S. Navy does or does not do. If Iran wants the strait closed, the strait's going to be closed, at least from a financial perspective. However, the strait is not closed to everybody. Chinese ships are still allowed to pass through. They're still allowed to get oil from Iran and transport it back to China. So the closure of the strait is a selective closure, although Iran recently threatened to do a total closure if the United States actually went forward and targeted all of its energy infrastructure. We'll see what happens on that in a second. Finally, the most embarrassing series of diplomatic incidents has occurred recently. This really just goes to show how weak the United States is, how weak Donald Trump is, how much of a boisterous moron he is. All right. So first, Donald Trump says that the United States is going to single-handedly open the Strait of Hormuz with our big, mighty guns and our powerful navy and stuff like that. When that didn't happen, he called upon every other, NATO country and Japan and South Korea and even China to help keep the strait open, to send ships to help keep the strait open. Then when every single country turned him down, he whined like a little bitch and said, without NATO, without the USA, NATO is a paper tiger. They don't want to join the fight to stop a nuclear-powered Iran. Now the fight is militarily won. No, it isn't. With very little danger for them. There's a lot of danger for them. They complain about the high oil prices they are forced to pay, but don't want to help open the Strait of Hormuz. A simple military maneuver that is the single reason for high oil prices. No, the reason for the high oil prices is because you're a moron, you and Israel struck Iran, and you didn't think of the consequences. So easy for them to do, with so little risk. Cowards! And we will remember. President Donald J. Trump. Yeah, so here he is whining. It's pathetic. It's embarrassing. To see the active head of state that act like this is humiliating on every level. And it just goes to show you that diplomacy matters. Threatening to invade Greenland, ripping up trade deals, that stuff matters. Words are not just words when you're dealing with diplomacy. They have consequences. And now he is finding out the consequences firsthand. It is my belief that Trump thought this war would be over, just like Venezuela, in a matter of hours. And so was no real plan to keep the Strait of Hormuz open or to reopen it if it got shut down. That's why he can't give a straight answer on how long it's going to be shut down or what the United States is going to do to open it. Because there is no solution. There is basically nothing the United States can do short of invading Iran and occupying their entire coastline that's actually going to open the Strait of Hormuz. If Iran wants to shut it down, they have every weapon they need to keep it shut down. All right, so why is it such a big deal that the Strait of Hormuz is shut down? Well, the main reason is because of the amount of oil and natural gas that pass through the Strait of Hormuz. So about 20% of all the global supply of oil is exported through the Persian Gulf and has to pass through the Strait of Hormuz. And now, of course, every country except for China no longer has access to that oil. Oil is important in plastics, pharmaceuticals, and transportation. It literally makes the world go round. Countries such as Saudi Arabia and Kuwait have actually completely shut down oil production because all of their tankers and all of their ships are full, but they have no way to actually export their oil. So even if the strait were open tomorrow, it'll still take a while to get that production back online. Oil refineries in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Israel have all been hit, and this is a big deal because refining capacity is what turns oil from a greasy black sludge into all of the wonderful products that we enjoy. About 2 weeks ago, Russian oil became unsanctioned. So ever since their invasion of Ukraine, there have been an increasing amount of sanctions on Russian oil, and basically the only countries that were buying Russian oil were like China or Iran or countries that were already allied with Moscow. But all of that has changed. In an effort to increase the global supply of oil, Trump has basically said that India specifically can now start buying Russian oil again. I've seen him get a lot of pushback for this. I actually agree with this. I think that's fine. Even though, yes, it will give Russia some money, it's better than the entire global economy collapsing. What I don't agree with is now he's gone a step further. Now he said that any Iranian oil that is already on a tanker in the Persian Gulf is now also unsanctioned. So now Iran basically gets to sell their oil at extremely inflated prices, and everybody wants to buy it, right? Everybody's saying, Iran, come dock in my country, come give me all the yummy, yummy oil. As Sun Tzu, the wise Chinese philosopher, once said, remove oil sanctions on the country you are currently at war with So gas prices don't cost you the midterm elections, even though the Republicans are almost certainly going to lose the midterm elections. This whole thing is so stupid, but I understand why he's doing it because, again, he doesn't want to collapse the entire global economy. Natural gas, on the other hand, the largest liquid natural gas production facility in the world in Qatar was struck and was taken offline. Natural gas is a big deal, not only for fertilizer, which is important in agricultural yields and thus impacts the agricultural and food sectors, but natural gas makes up the majority of the electricity generation across the world. So you disrupt the supply of natural gas, you disrupt the supply of electricity in many different countries. We will see increasing prices for both oil and natural gas in the coming months and possibly even in the coming years. Again, as long as the Strait of Hormuz is shut down, there is nothing that can reduce those prices. They're going to go up and up and up, and you are going to feel it in the price of everything, and especially at the gas pump. All right, now let's kind of take a look around the world at some of the impacts that this war is already having. So the most dramatic impact is on the aviation industry. About 18,000 flights were canceled just in the first week, and the price of jet fuel has already doubled. In the coming weeks, we're going to see more and more airlines cancel flights because it becomes simply unprofitable to fly the routes that they already have with the tickets that they have already sold. So you can expect to see, for example, airlines canceling all their flights and then making everyone rebook their tickets at a higher price. And obviously, you can see on this live flight radar here that the airspace over the Middle East is completely closed. All flights now are either going up north over Turkmenistan and Azerbaijan, or they're swinging way down south, bypassing the UAE and going over Oman and then back up into India and Pakistan. So if you are planning on taking a vacation anywhere in the world right now, be advised it's going to be dramatically more expensive than it normally is. Recently, the Prime Minister of Japan visited Trump at the White House, and curiously, one of the things that occurred while this was happening, besides the normal Trump, mentioning Pearl Harbor and embarrassing himself and the entire country, is that Iran came out and said that Japan would be allowed to pass through the Strait of Hormuz and buy oil. I'm not exactly sure the specifics on this deal, and I'm not sure if there has been any follow-through, but either way, this is significant because it shows a willingness by the Iranian government to try and peel away America's allies, particularly in East Asia, in exchange for allowing them to purchase oil. I think this is going to be a very effective strategy going forward, and it wouldn't surprise me if other American allies, line up to Iran and start begging them to allow them to buy their oil in exchange for not intervening militarily on America's side. Southeast Asia is one of the regions of the world that has been hit most dramatically because a lot of the oil from Southeast Asia either comes from Malaysia, Brunei, or Thailand, or it comes from the Middle East and the Persian Gulf. So, for example, the Philippines has already instituted a 4-day work week in order to basically cut down on fuel consumption from people commuting to and from work. Thailand has banned all oil exports, and other measures have been taken by other Southeast Asian countries in order to try and secure as much fuel as possible. Recently, a couple days ago, the British military base on Diego Garcia was struck. Let's actually go to Google Earth real quick so I can show y'all this in detail. Okay, here we are on Google Earth. Here is the Strait of Hormuz. Here is Iran. The British naval base that was struck was in Diego Garcia, which is all the way over here. This is Diego Garcia right here. Okay? This is very far away. Let's actually see exactly how far away it is. It is about 4,000 kilometers away. Okay? And you Americans watching can convert that into miles on your own time. So what this means is that the previous range of Iranian missiles, which was assumed to be about 2,500 kilometers, is much, much larger. This means that basically every single European capital, London, Paris, Berlin, Rome, all of them are potentially within the range of Iranian missiles. This means that any European country is probably going to think twice before they send ships or men or material to aid the United States and Israel in their war, because there is now a potential threat of direct retaliation on Iran's part. It was previously believed that Iran did not have this capability, but they clearly demonstrated that they in fact do. The last effect of this war globally that I wanted to take note of is the situation in Ukraine. So one of the chief offensive weapons that Russia had was the Shahed drone. And now that the war in Iran has started, the exports of the Shahed drone to Russia have been severely reduced. And even though Russia is now making more money from their unsanctioned oil, that is not translating into battlefield success at all. In fact, the Russian advance is going at the slowest pace in a long, long time. Real quick, we're going to run through the months of February and March. And you can see that as soon as the war starts, the pace of advance slows dramatically. Let's go ahead and play this through at 3 times speed. So here we are in early February. By the way, this was the main center of fighting here around Pokrovsk. The city, I think, is finally fully fallen, but the advance beyond the city is basically stalled, as you'll see here in a moment. So even during early February, oh, there we go, there's one little advance. You can see that the Russian army is really not advancing all that fast, all that much. There was a big one during that day. But then, at the end of February, in the beginning of March, when we start to see this war begin in earnest, you will see basically no movement on this front line. So here we go. Now we are in March. And there was a little bit of movement right there. But on basically all other fronts, in all other sectors, there is virtually none. You can see we just went past a whole week, and basically nothing is changing. Right? Day by day by day by day, basically nothing is happening. Okay? And I believe, again, that this is because of the lack of missiles, or not missiles, the lack of Shahed drones in the Russian arsenal, and Ukraine having more support and more funding because of their military collaborations with other countries. All right, now let's look at some of the effects of this war in the United States specifically. So the first and most obvious is that the price of gas is skyrocketing. It depends on where you live, by how much, but I've seen some people are saying it's already up 30 cents. Some people are saying it's up 60 cents. I've seen people saying it's up $1, $1.50. It just kind of depends on where you live. But keep in mind, again, that the price of gas affects the price of everything, because the primary way goods are transported within the United States is by truck, and trucks take fuel to run. So, price of gas goes up, price of everything goes up. Have fun with your record inflation. Now, the worst part of all of this to me is watching all these MAGA hacks, these MAGA idiots, go from a year ago where they were completely anti-war, no new wars, Trump's the president of peace, yada, 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 to now today they're, of course, tripping over themselves, saying peace through strength, it's not warmongering, Trump's, our Lord and Savior. Obviously, there's no logical consistency, because if you still support Trump at this point, if you're a hardcore MAGA, you don't have a brain, you're cattle, you're sheep, you're an animal, and you're just an idiot. So I don't expect any logical consistency of these people. They have basically no thoughts inside their head. They're just told what to think by Fox News or by Joe Rogan or by whatever media they happen to consume. So because of this, unsurprisingly, most Republicans still support this war, but not all of them. So according to recent polling, about 58% of Americans disapprove of this war, 38% say they approve, and the remaining percentage are unsure. So within that 38%, you got to figure about 50% of the country is Republican. So that means that there is about 12%, there's about a quarter of Republicans who are not animals, who are not sheep, who actually have two brain cells to rub together and realize that this war is bullshit, Trump is a liar and a pedophile, and it's completely unjustified, and it's just another Iraq war situation where we're invading a country in the Middle East for no reason, or at least no reason that will personally benefit them. Another very disappointing outcome of this is that the Democrat Party has been basically silent on the issue. If I was in Congress right now, every day I'd be going on any cable news show that would invite me on and basically screaming, Trump is committing war crimes, Pete Hegseth is committing war crimes, this war is pointless, Americans are dying for no reason, Trump should be impeached, etc., etc. But there's been basically no pushback from any of the mainstream Democrats on this issue. None of them are calling for peace. None of them are saying we need to stop the war. And the reason for that is that, just like the Republicans, they are mostly, almost to a man, completely controlled by Israel, completely controlled by AIPAC. So, of course, Israel supports the war, so all of them have to get in line and support the war as well, because God forbid anybody in the United States government go against the interests of Israel. Alright, so the next major military operation I think is going to happen will be the American invasion of Karg Island, and Lindsey Graham of the Senate recently admitted as much. Let's take a look.
So here's what I tell President Trump. Keep it up for a few more weeks. Take Karg Island, where all of the resources they have to produce oil. Control that island. Let this regime die on a vine.
Is this going to, though, take Karg Island? Is it going to involve U.S. troops on the ground? Let me just read you something from The Atlantic. Does an assessment on that. They say U.S. troops may well take Karg Island. We believe in their ability to do so, but only to endure ballistic missile strikes, drone attacks, petrochemical smoke, all without a reliable means of obtaining logistical support. The result could be a grinding war of attrition. They talk about how far away they would be from resupply.
I'm sort of tired of all this armchair quarterback, and this has been an amazing military operation. God bless the fallen.
But it's a difference when we talk about troops on the ground.
I trust the Marines, not that guy. I trust DOD. We got 2 Marine expeditionary units sailing to this island. We did Iwo Jima. We can do this. The Marines, my money is always on the Marines.
Wow, isn't that awesome? Don't you love it? Don't you think it's such a good strategy to just tell the entire world exactly what your next plan is? It's incredible how freaking stupid these people are. Oh my god. Another big piece of evidence supporting this upcoming invasion is that 2 Marine divisions have been redeployed to the Middle East. That's about 6,000 Marines that are currently on their way to the Middle East to potentially participate in this operation. What exactly is Karg Island? Karg Island is the main oil export terminal for the Iranian regime. And real quick, we're going to go back to Google Earth and take a closer look. Okay, so here's Iran, and this tiny little island down here is Karg Island. So, Karg Island sits off the coast of Iran, and because it's far out into the ocean, the water around it is deep enough that the really big super heavy tankers can dock and fill themselves with oil, whereas if they tried to dock on the Iranian mainland, the water is actually too shallow. So, America has already conducted airstrikes against Karg Island, although thankfully they didn't target the oil infrastructure. They were just trying to target the military infrastructure on the island. Now here's the problem. If we're going to try and take this island through naval invasion, which is how you would do that with Marines, first of all, we have to get the entire invasion force around the Gulf of Oman, through the Strait of Hormuz, and up basically the entire Persian Gulf without being blasted by drones or naval drones or missiles. Already a pretty hard task. Imagine if during D-Day, The English Channel was instead a narrow strait, and Germany controlled one side of it. That's basically what it would be like. And then, when we get to the actual island, we have to naval invade, which is one of the most difficult military operations that there is. And we have no supply lines, right? Because any supply lines that we have to be through the sea, and they have to run through the Strait of Hormuz, and that runs into the exact same problems that you have with being vulnerable to Iranian drone and missile fire. And then, after all of that, if we can actually take the island, first of all, we're in perfect range for any drone or missile attacks from the Iranian mainland. And second of all, there's nothing stopping Iran from just saying, well, we don't want the US to have all this oil, and then they could just go ahead and blow up all of the oil and all of the infrastructure on the island, rendering it completely useless anyway. I don't understand what the plan here is. If the United States government thinks that cutting off Iranian oil sales is magically going to make them surrender, instead of making them basically giving them the green light to target every single oil field and port and oil refinery in the entire Middle East, I don't know what they're thinking. Basically, if this happens, I believe that Iran will immediately retaliate, and the price of oil will easily go above $200 a barrel. We might even see like $300 a barrel, because a significant portion of the world's oil export capacity will have been destroyed, and it will take probably 5 to 10 years to repair it all. So this is basically the apocalypse for your average Joe if the United States actually goes ahead with this invasion of Cargo Island. Not to mention, the invasion has a very real chance of just straight up failing. It is certainly possible that Iran can hold off 6,000 Marines, and because we've been so obvious that we are targeting this island, I have no doubt that Iran has done everything they can to reinforce and resupport this island. So be on the lookout for this. I estimate this invasion will happen probably this week, but no later than next week. Alright, now let's examine the most important sort of interaction in this war, and that is the balance, the dance, the interplay between missiles and drones and the interceptors used to destroy them. So we'll start with the drone side of things. So the main weapon of the Iranian regime is the Shahed drone, and every Shahed drone costs about $50,000. It is unknown the exact numbers of ballistic missiles and drones that the Iranian regime possesses. If I had to just throw out a guess, I'd say they've probably used maybe half of their ballistic missiles, but probably less than a quarter of their total number of drones. It should also be noted that they have the capacity to produce at least 500 drones a week. Now, the US and Israel have been targeting these drone production facilities, but the production supply chain for these drones is very decentralized, so even if you destroy a couple factories, it doesn't necessarily mean you take the entire production offline. Conversely, compare that to the production of interceptors. So we can only produce 620 Patriot missiles, those are the interceptors that the United States primarily uses, annually. 620 per year. 500 drones in a week, 620 per year. Math doesn't math. Already the interception over the United Arab Emirates and Israel in particular has been spotty. The Iron Dome is missing a lot more missiles and drones than it used to. Each one of these Patriot missiles costs about $5 million. Okay? Again, $5 million, $50,000. Math doesn't math. It should also be noted that every single interception usually requires multiple missiles, right? So every drone that's intercepted requires about 3 to 4 missiles actually fired at it in order to intercept it. There do exist cheaper methods to intercept drones specifically, and Ukraine has developed many of them, including like jamming technologies, or there's the laser system that the British have developed. One of the chief pieces of evidence for the fact that I stated earlier, which is that Trump thought this war would be over in like 48 hours and he had no real long-term plans, is that he did not ask the Ukrainians for help. Before the war started, Trump could have gone to Ukraine and said, hey, I know we haven't always been on the best of terms, or we're about to do this whole thing with Iran, and it'd be really awesome if you helped out and gave us some anti-drone systems, gave us some jamming technology, whatever you got, we'll take it. But that didn't happen. In fact, to this day, the U.S. still has not asked Ukraine for help, but Saudi Arabia and the UAE have both asked Ukraine to help them try and intercept Iranian drones, and Ukraine has complied. Half of all THAAD, that is the primary expensive American missile interception system, have been destroyed. So there were only 8 THAAD systems on Earth, and each one of those costs about $1 billion, and half of them have already been destroyed. Trump has had to take THAAD systems from South Korea and other places and send them to Middle East to replace the ones that we've already lost. So, take all this together, what does the picture look like? In terms of economics, every time an Iranian drone gets shot down, Iran wins the economic front. And in terms of production capacity, it is only a matter of time before all of these fancy Patriot batteries that we have scattered throughout the Middle East essentially just run out of ammo. And Iran knows this. That's why day after day, continually, they are continuing to pepper to try and strike targets in Israel, targets in the Gulf, targets in Saudi Arabia, and also why they haven't surrendered. Because they know the longer this drags on, the more advantage they have in this particular theater of the war. All right, let's wrap things up, shall we? So I've seen a lot of discussion about, this is going to start World War III, or this is going to lead us down the road to World War III. No. World War III has already begun. In fact, it began a long time ago. So, pop quiz time. When did World War II start? I'll give you a second to think about it. Now, most of you who know a thing or two probably said September 1st, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. But you could just as easily make the case that World War II actually started in 1937, when Japan invaded China. I view this in much the same way. So I think the actual beginning of World War III was in fact the Russian invasion of Ukraine. We have now opened up a second front, a second theater in the Middle East with Iran, and of course the final theater will be when China invades Taiwan. But the point here is that I think it is a mistake to think about this as leading us down the road to World War III, and instead to sort of reframe it as, okay, we are already in World War III, how do we move on from here? I've said this many times in this video, but I think that the United States had absolutely no plan going into this. You can tell this mainly in the rhetoric coming out of the Trump administration. One second we're winning the war, next second we need help, then we're winning the war, then we need help, then we're making peace, then we're negotiating, then we're not. It's just a mess. There's no consistency. Nobody knows what's going on because nobody has a plan. Nobody has a direction that they want to take this except for Israel, and Israel just wants to completely obliterate the country and turn it into a failed state. This has caused a sort of catch-22 on the American side because basically neither side can back down now, right? Trump can't back down. Trump can't just pack it up because then the Strait of Hormuz would remain closed and he would have nothing to show for it, and Israel would be very unhappy with him. And Iran can't back down because doing so would just cause this entire conflict to restart in about 6 months, just like what happened last time. So the path to war is now set, and I expect this war to last at least another 6 months, although if it lasts a couple more years, I would not be surprised at all. Basically, I see absolutely no end in sight, especially now that Iran has said that they are refusing to negotiate. In the meantime, sitting in the corner is China, and China is absolutely loving all of this. China's position is only getting stronger, assuming that they can continue to buy oil, okay? And that is a big if, to be fair, But as long as they can continue to buy oil from Iran, their position is only getting stronger because America's attention is being taken away from Taiwan, from South Korea, from East Asia in general, and being redirected towards the Middle East. Every plane that America loses, every Patriot missile that we fire is one less resource we have to deploy against China when they try and invade Taiwan. The clearest outcome from all of this is that I think we can finally officially proclaim that the American empire is dead. Our global influence is basically non-existent now. None of our allies actually want to join us with this. In fact, most of our allies, according to recent polling, now trust China more than the American government. And I can't necessarily blame them, because even though China is, yes, scheming and, are in it for themselves and are trying to form their own empire, at least they are consistent, at least they are logical, at least they are predictable. America is completely erratic, completely insane. You never know what they're going to do next. You just know it's going to be something stupid and poorly thought out and incompetent and terrible for themselves and ultimately the world. The headline is, get used to this, get used to the higher gas prices, get used to our meddling in the Middle East. It ain't going anywhere. Okay, with all that said, I hope you enjoyed the video. Hopefully that wasn't too depressing for you. Like, comment, and subscribe if you want to see more, and I will catch y'all on the flip side.